Happy holidays. It is a pleasure to see you. And, Diane and I don't usually get a chance to see each other face to face, but I've known Diane for a, a while.
Let's let that be our little secret, David.
But I have to say, I met Diane early on. See, the thing is, I met Diane early on in my relationship with the woman who's now my wife. And my wife had so there's a very, a warm spot in my heart because you and I became friends early on when I was going back and forth to Japan. My wife, My wife moved to Japan to get her master's degree. And I said, how am I going to get to Japan to visit her? And Diane said, well, they're interested in Quark Express in Japan. Maybe
Good
you should
old
come
Quark Express.
So Quark and Diane brought me together with my wife-to-be at that time. How about that?
David,
Great.
that's so sweet. I didn't realize that.
It's true. So I would go visit my wife Debbie, and you would be there in Tokyo because what a lot of people don't know is that Diane Burns, who has been in this industry for a while, we're just going to leave it at that, and like me, was known as the mother of DTP in Japan.
DTP no haha desu. That's right, David.
And I loved it, and I love that phrase, DTP no haha. And I remember, I just want to share that one story, my favorite story of being on stage with you, Diane, in Tokyo, and being introduced. That they introduced Diane as the mother of DTP, and then they turned to me, and there was a pause, and you could tell they didn't want me to feel bad, and so they said, "And this is the father of DTP." And in the moment, I just thought, well, thank you very much. But in retrospect, I thought it was very funny that you and I got to be the mother and father of...
Yes. The birth of an entire industry in Japan. That's right.
I remember that.
Those were heady days. It was before Apple had introduced their PostScript laser printer for Japanese, and it was very sketchy, but it got started.
How did you first find yourself in Japan?
Well, I was part of the Stanford publishing course, and basically a guy from Apple who was going to be charged with bringing what was known at the time as DTP into Japan met me at a seminar and asked me would I like to come to Japan and talk about using the Macintosh for graphic design and publishing and printing.
Right.
And it was really interesting because it was this would have been in 87, let's say. Mm-hmm. And so we had started that industry here in 84, and things were moving along. We had more than 2 fonts by then, and I think Linotype had introduced PostScript RIP for their image setters.
Yeah.
But in Japan, it was like starting all over again because the laser printer the PostScript laser printer wasn't introduced to 1989, and there were only 2 fonts. And there was a whole issue around excellence and quality, and yet the benefits of using the Macintosh for this kind of work prevailed, and slowly by slowly, it became very popular.
And it's and what's amazing is, you were doing work with the Stanford Publishing Institute, and then also later working with Berkeley. You've taught in a lot of places and a lot of people, a lot of private companies as well. But at the same time, you also started this company, right, that would start doing translation work.
Well, that's right. I started a company that at the time was called TechArt in 1984. Our first, it was to use the Macintosh for graphic design, to combine images and graphics. And our first workstation was actually an Apple Lisa running MacWorks software. And we came perilously close to buying a CompuGraphic image setter. that had an interface with the Lisa software, but fortunately,
Really?
we dragged our feet, and then PostScript arrived, and everything changed. So
Wow.
that's what we were doing anyway. So when I started working with Apple Japan, it became clear that it was possible to do the same thing using the Macintosh for Japanese and other Asian languages. So we slowly started introducing that service into our company. We got a Japanese RIP for our Linotype image setter, and off we went. And now it's a main part of our business. That is doing work in primarily East Asian languages, although we work in Middle Eastern languages and Roman languages and sometimes English.
English too. Incredible.
And English too. Yes. That's
Well,
our byline. And English too. Yeah.
That's a great motto. And English too. And because of all that work, you started teaching how to do multilingual publishing with InDesign. Probably earlier, you probably talked about that with Quark Express, but then in the 2000s you were doing InDesign, and you ended up doing a course on that for lynda.com.
That's right. Yeah, I still get questions from that course, and it's a lot easier now. One thing that a lot of people don't realize, two important things. One is there is a Japanese version of InDesign. People may know that, but all the features that are in the Japanese version of InDesign are actually already in the English version of InDesign that we use here in the U.S. It's just we don't have an interface to get to them.
Right.
So really the English version can handle anything about Japanese or Chinese or Korean text for that matter, but it's just that you can't get to all of the interface. The other thing that's important for people to realize is that using the Japanese version of InDesign does not translate the text for you.
Yeah, exactly.
It just allows you to do the typesetting. But one of the things, David, I did for my Lynda course is worked with some folks at Adobe, and I developed a template for the English version of InDesign that lets you easily introduce some of the typesetting features for Japanese and Chinese. And
I remember that.
So,
yes.
yeah, and it's still, even though it was developed for a much earlier version of InDesign, it still works. I had a query on it yesterday from someone who had watched the course. So it's really possible now, and people don't have to have a whole different operating system to do Asian typesetting, which we had to do at one time. Now you have it on your desktop. You just have to figure out how to access the features that you need and hire a translator.
Don't forget the translator.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
That is important. Well, you've done the East Asian language stuff and Middle Eastern language stuff, a lot of foreign language stuff, and a huge amount of print over the years. And one of your clients was Patagonia, I believe, right?
Still is. That's right.
Still is. And so you've done an enormous amount of work. But over the past few years, you've been getting into a very different sort of work with InDesign. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit. And that's interactive work with interactive documents. So what is it that appeals about that for you?
Well, interactive, a pretty rich set of interactive features were introduced with InDesign back in CS5, I think.
Yeah.
And they were to be used with Flash. And not long after that, a guy named Steve Jobs came along and said that for all of these operating systems that we're developing for these great devices like iPhones and not long after iPads, we're not going to use Flash because Flash, is not good. Let's just put it that way. I could use more colorful language, but he put the kibosh on Flash. And so those features, which were remarkably well developed and well thought out, thank you, Michael Nennis, for a version 1, lay dormant for a while because there was really no place to go with them as Flash sort of subsided. But then along came, with the CC products, fixed layout EPUBs, and then a couple of years ago, Publish Online, which is Adobe's free service that lets you publish HTML5 files onto the web. And all of these interactive features, what happened with Fixed Layout EPUB, I should back up and say, is that all of these interactive features that were developed originally for Flash were converted to HTML5.
Yeah.
So they sort of move forward with the industry, if you will. And as our work, print is not dead, but print without an online component is probably dead. Almost everyone needs to get online. And the interactive features of InDesign, I think, are important because they give someone who knows InDesign the ability to make documents that come alive a little bit. And now they can do something with them because they can publish them to the web with Publish Online, or they can use a plugin like HR Productions In5 and have a pretty rich document experience with things that move and make noise and all of that sort of thing online. And it's within the grasp of the InDesign user, and that's what I think is really important. And I think for a whole set of users, Publish Online is really, really exciting. There's been remarkable work done with the interactive features just of InDesign and Publish Online. And I've been collecting a lot of these projects for the last couple of years, and I hope people will check it out. I think we're going to put up the URL or put in the comments the URL for my Publish Online collection. Where people can see about 40 projects that people have been doing just with InDesign and Publish Online, creating hamburger menus and all kinds of interesting transitions on the page and movement. And, for documents that don't need to be secure, for brochures and catalogs and this kind of thing, it's really a perfect way to give a much broader access to your material. And you don't want to get carried away, but just sometimes having a little bit of movement on the page is just what we short attention spanned people need to actually make us read. Oh, wait, it moved. Oh, maybe I'll that. So it's been really exciting, and I have a couple of courses on that on Lynda. I have a course on InDesign animations. It's actually about a 5-hour course. There's a lot that can be done with it, and and I have a course on Publish Online as well. So it's a really exciting area, and when these kinds of features are put in the hands of creative pros, it's amazing what can be done.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned putting it in the hands of creative pros. Because how about that? Well done. Nice segue. Because you're going to be speaking at Creative Pro Week, right? In next June here, up here in Seattle. And last year you were at New Orleans at Creative Pro Week, and you spoke about animation and Publish Online. And I thought that was it's very inspirational for people because, like you said, everybody needs to kind of straddle that divide between print and digital. We all need to be on both sides of that now. And the idea that you could create a print piece with InDesign and just with just a couple clicks, upload that to Publish Online. I mean, it's built into InDesign. It's so easy to do.
Right. Everybody has it. Everybody has it. Yeah.
Everybody who has CC. I mean, it is a CC thing.
That's right.
But you can upload that to Publish Online. It sits on Adobe servers. And, like you said, maybe just you can add some animations or some interactivity or not. I mean, some people are using it just to put a document up there just so they can have a web page, a URL for the same thing that they have, that literally exactly the same kind of document they would have in print. So you can take it as far as you want, really.
That's right. And it's not the solution for every document that needs to be put online.
Sure.
It is, as you mentioned, on Adobe servers. That's a big problem for certain types of documents. But for a whole host of documents and designers who don't have a big team behind them to do all kinds of custom programming and very expensive productions to put things online, it's a wonderful, wonderful solution, I think. And,
it is.
Yeah. So I hope more people learn about it and let Adobe know they're interested in it. And there is a section on Adobe's website called User Voice, where you can make recommendations about Publish Online. And
Yes.
so I invite people to take a look at that and check it out and let Adobe know what they think.
I was actually just on UserVoice. It's indesign.uservoice.com, and that you can go in there and search for Publish Online. Just type Publish Online,
right.
And all of a sudden you'll see several really excellent suggestions show up. And the Adobe team does look at that.
That's right. They really do, David. And so the idea is if there is a feature there that you've come across that you wish Publish Online had, you can vote for it, or you can create your own feature suggestion.
Yeah, I really want to encourage people to search through that and find the ones that you like, and you can sign in. It's super easy on UserVoice and vote for the ones you like. So you mentioned the password protection. Password protection is something a lot of people have asked for.
Right.
And you can vote for that if that's important to you.
If that's important to you. That's
yes.
right. That's right. I'm getting so Erica's put up a couple of URLs. One is the Publish Online collection, and the other, though, is the specific user voice area for Publish Online. So you can check those out. And I do have a question that came up from Erica. The question is, how do the interactive elements affect the file size?
Yes.
And that's a very good question. The interactive elements, you have to keep in mind that typically what you make interactive is often elements that are already on the page. And so the actual attaching of an animation to a block of type adds almost nothing to the file size. You're not putting something extra into it. That's one thing. Now, what happens as people move to creating Publish Online versions of their documents is once they realize what the possibilities are, they may start adding elements. For example, video. That's really common. You have a print magazine and you have a photograph of some guy, David Blatner, for example, and that's well and good in the magazine, but in Publish Online, you can have not just a headshot of David Blatner, but you can have a video of David Blatner explaining a particular point or that kind of thing. So if you start adding media, yes, it increases the file size, just like it would, for anything. And if people are putting video into their files, it's a good idea to use a utility like Handbrake or something like that to sample the files down, because that's just the reality of online video, is you want it as lean and mean as possible. But
although it's great that InDesign treats videos just like it does any other graphic, and it links to the file on disk, right? So
that's right.
Technically, it wouldn't make your InDesign file that much larger. It'll make your Publish Online document much larger.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm talking about the Publish Online document. Now, the other thing you can do with the Publish Online document is you can point to a YouTube video. You don't have to have it embedded, as it were, in the Publish Online document. So
that's great.
Yeah. So, and a lot of people do that. So it's really, as I say, a very accessible way to do some really, really exciting things with your documents and get online, because that's the direction things are going, for sure. Yeah. So that's been very interesting to me, and it's a whole part of InDesign that I think is untapped at this point.
Yeah, I think it's definitely needs to be used a lot more than it currently is by InDesign users. You also mentioned In5 by Ajar Productions.
That's right.
And In5 is a fascinating tool because it lets you. It's a commercial tool, right? I mean, you have to pay extra for that.
Costs money, yeah.
But it lets you export the HTML directly to your own hard drives. You can put it on your own server. You could build it into an app. We actually started using that last year for CreativePro Week. For presentation, for the slides, the slideshow, all of the slideshows
with it. Another thing you can do with In5 that is a question that comes up about Publish Online is you can export your InDesign file, and it supports all the interactive features, animations, buttons, multi-state objects. But you can export your file as HTML text, which means it's searchable.
Yes.
Whereas with Publish Online, one thing to note about Publish Online is when you publish a document to Publish Online, all of the text is converted to SVG outlines. Like everything else, there are pros and cons. The pros are the type is beautiful. It doesn't matter what kind of font you use. If you want to use your ancient Type 1 Adobe Pro. You can.
Yeah.
But it gives beautiful results. The downside is it's an outline, and you can't search the text.
Right.
So again, that for some people, that doesn't matter.
Does Publish Online work with East Asian fonts too?
Oh, indeed. Yeah, sure. Because it's just going to SVG outlines. So I've done a couple of projects that include Japanese characters, and it works beautifully. Yeah. It's just if you have a document that it's critical that people be able to search to
that makes sense.
Access the content. Publish Online is not the solution. However, that's not to say that you can't build in navigation aids. Publish Online documents support InDesign's fantastic table of contents feature, and that's you can build in a certain amount. So
what would you say is one of the? I mean, it's so easy to create interactive documents. You're making animations with the animation panel. The timing panel makes it very easy. The buttons are terrific. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the ways that things that actually are kind of tricky to do with interactive documents?
Well, I think as I mentioned earlier, these features are all kind of a version 1 of the features. And one thing that comes to mind, for example, is if you have a series of animations, something moves in, drops, then it spins around, and then it moves again. It's very hard to make that kind of a sequence loop. The looping tools are very primitive. If something simply spins and you want it to spin again, sure, you can loop it. But when you start building multi-stepped animations, which is, quite possible and commonly done, it becomes a little tricky to loop them. There are some natural things that people would want to do, for example, in opacity changes, fade in or fade out. Right now, if you just use the InDesign interface, you can only have something start at 0% opacity and fade into 100% opacity. You can change the opacity of your object on the InDesign page. So if the object's 80%, that would be at 100% opacity. But let me give another example. Let's say you want something to start at 100% opacity. Let me go in the other direction. You want an object to start at 100% opacity, and you want it to fade to 20% opacity. That's a really common thing. You just want it to fall into the background. There's no way in the interface to do that directly because you can only go from 100% to 0. There is, however, a fairly easy hack you can do, but it's a hack. You can you can export an object as a snippet, and then you can edit the snippet and put it back into InDesign, and you can have changes in opacity.
Because snippets are basically text files. I mean, you can get into the text files to edit them with a text editor.
I don't do code, but it's simple enough that even I can find where to change it. And if people go to that Publish Online collection, I have a sample document. It's called LA Interactive. And as you go through the pages, you'll see several examples of where something starts at 100% and then fades back to 20% or 10% or something like that. And it was done using this little snippet hack. So, it'd be nice if there was a place in the animation panel where you had a slider that you could set the beginning and ending opacity changes.
That's great.
That's great. Like that. Yeah. But it's a lot of fun, and I love presenting this because people get so excited. They're it's a jaw. If you don't know about it, it's just a jaw dropping. Oh my God, I can do this. I can go back to my desk tomorrow and do it. And
I feel like that's so important. I mean, the reason I got into DTP way back in the 80s, the reason I got into this originally was that sense of empowerment, that sense that I can do this.
That's right.
I can't draw a straight line, but with the computer, I can do all kinds of things. So once again, I really love this idea that with InDesign and with Publish Online and with In5 and so on, I can do this kind of animation and interactives and interactive objects and buttons and slideshows. I can do
That's
all
right.
of this without a dev team. I don't need somebody else to tell me
Exactly.
that.
Or,
Yeah.
or I don't have to learn another piece of software. You know, as
Yes.
much as Adobe would like
True.
to think that all people do with their lives is sit around waiting for a new product to come out so they can learn it
Right.
and master it. That's not real life, and people don't have time to. Often don't have time or the bandwidth to learn a new program. But that's why, just if I can put in another plug here, that's why events like Creative Pro Week are so important, because people can lock in this time where they're not coming there necessarily to learn a new software program. They're coming there to learn how to work with what they know or what they have or what they're familiar with even better.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And Diane has been speaking at Creative Pro Week, and then before that at the InDesign conference for a number of years. So she knows the magic that can happen when you put a lot of people live in the same space and you see what kind of information gets passed back and forth. So
it is, yeah. It's great. It's very exciting, yeah.
We have to finish up here, but it's such a pleasure just chatting with you and catching up a little bit with you and hearing about what you've been doing.
Thanks for asking me to join you on live. We were going to assume we're live now.
I know, this whole time.
We don't know when it started.
We don't. We may be starting in 2 minutes. I don't know. I think Erica might have been right. I think you're right. I think Erica was right. Always trust Erica Gamet. That's the rule.
Erica says and assume it's right.
Yes.
You won't go wrong.
So I do want to say thank you to Erica in the background who's been running the show. And thank you very much, Diane, for taking the time.
And the best to you and yours, and happy holidays to everybody. Thank you.
And to you. All right. Take care. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.